doing? Welcome back to the channel. It's time for another entry in my Grand Dames of Golden Age detective fiction series, my kind of unofficial little series I'm doing. Last month, I believe it was last month, it might have been September, I can't recall exactly when, but I did a video about Agatha Christie, which is a good place to start since she's the most famous of all detective novelists, really, I guess, and especially Golden Age ones, especially female Golden Age detective novelists. Now, the women tended to dominate this particular genre back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, etc. There were, as I mentioned before, many successful male practitioners, including John Dixon Carr, who I've talked about already on this channel. But it's the women writers, particularly, who are most fondly remembered, and many of them still read today. Now, the one I want to talk about today, Margery Allingham. Margery Allingham is maybe not as well known as some of the others. She's not as well known, of course, as Agatha Christie or even Dorothy L. Sayers, creator of Lord Peter Wimsey, of which more anon I will talk about in the future video there. But Margery Allingham is perhaps my favorite of these Grand Dames of Golden Age detective fiction for several reasons. Now, of course, Agatha Christie can't be beat for plot construction, and she created a couple of famous indelible characters, in Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple. But there's something, I'd say, overall quality of writing, sensitivity to the, reading of the emotional currents in a room, etc., that Margery Allingham really nails in her books. And she also created a very terrific character in Albert Campion, Mr. Campion. Margery Allingham was born Margery Louise Allingham. She was born in 1904 in London, I believe, and she didn't live very long, sadly. She passed away from breast cancer in 1966. So in her 62 years of writing, though, she was pretty prolific. She got a lot of books written, and the majority of them featured her detective character, kind of gentleman adventurer who becomes more of a private detective, Albert Campion. Now, a little bit about Campion. Campion started in the first book, which she wrote. Again, she wrote a few books before this, but the first Campion novel was The Crime at Black Dudley, also known as The Black Dudley Murder. The Black Dudley Murder. Here's kind of an interesting old, what is this? MB? I haven't even heard of this. A McFadden Bartell book. Published in England as The Crime at Black Dudley, and she dedicates it to the gang. Okay, this was printed in 1962 in New York. So, kind of an interesting cover, and interesting back cover. Now, this was the first appearance of Mr. Campion, and in the beginning, Allingham, I guess, sort of conceived of him as a little bit of a parody of Dorothy L. Sayers, Lord Peter Wimsey, the kind of aristocratic private detective. But I don't think she was planning to write a series about him or anything, and he's not even the main character in the book, but he kind of is the most standout character in the book, and maybe a little more Bertie Woosterish, foolish looking, or at least appearing in this book. But her American publishers demanded more, and so she brought Campion back and kind of fine-tuned his character so that he became the main focus of the books. Mr. Campion, Albert Campion, is an unusual sort of, compared to the other Golden Age detectives. He is a private detective, but eventually he gets very close relationship with a couple of Scotland Yard detectives. One's Chief Inspector Oates, I believe, Stanislaus Oates, and he also becomes friends, and I believe even his sister, it kind of becomes brothers-in-law with Luke Parker, I believe his name is, another detective for Scotland Yard. But Campion himself starts off, like I said, as kind of an adventurer. He's a mysterious figure. He's the kind of guy that seems kind of nondescript. He kind of fits into the background. But people are immediately at ease when they're talking to him and realize they can, unburden their souls around him. he seems unassuming, but he's actually highly competent and highly attuned to his surroundings and the kind of emotional wavelengths of everybody in the room or in a given situation. And he's mysterious in another way too. It's kind of hinted at that he has some kind of European royalty connection. He may even be, of noble blood, but he is, and Mr. Campion, Albert Campion, is an assumed name. But whatever the case may be about his actual background, what's the real Campion that we see is a man with kind of his feet in two worlds. One is in the kind of upper class, toffish world of, estates and grand parties and the art and fashion scene, and also with strong connections as the series goes on with MI5 as well as Scotland Yard. And he also has his other foot firmly planted in the kind of, underworld, criminal underworld of London and the environs there. And how he kind of also keeps a hand in there is his manservant, a wonderful character called Mager von Steen Lug. Lug is a very kind of cheeky and unusual sort of butler or valet to a gentleman's gentleman like Campion is. Campion has this kind of bachelor flat, but he ends up in most books in different kind of worlds or arenas that he is involved in these cases. And the first several books, for the most part, are more thrillers, kind of in the Dornford Yates, H.C. Sapper, the guy who wrote Bulldog Drummond, that kind of mode, where Campion it's more of a jolly adventure with some danger and thriller elements that was very popular in the late 20s and in the 30s. And those are very fun books in their own right. There are mystery elements, but gradually the series became much more focused on traditional Golden Age detective murder mysteries. So I have a lot of Margery Allingham's Campion books. She wrote at least, I think, 19 novels. The 20th one was finished by her husband, Philip Youngman Carter, on her request after she passed away. Carter also wrote a couple more novels featuring Campion after that. And then since then, starting in 2014, a writer named Mike Ripley, who finished Youngman Carter's last book that he didn't finish in 2014 and wrote several more, I believe another 8 Campion novels, a kind of continuation. I haven't checked out any of those. And I haven't read any of the Youngman Carter ones either. Kind of a little focused on the original writer is something that I'm more interested in. So I do own several novels that I don't have with me here. So I'll talk a little bit about those as we go through the series real briefly here. Again, Allingham's a really fine writer, and her mysteries are quite good too. She's a very good plotter as well, and Campion frequently is in a bit more danger from the murderers or the villains in some of these books than you might find in a Poirot novel or a Lord Peter Wimsey novel or something. But that kind of feeds into the old-fashioned adventure element that is in some of the earlier books. So the next book after Crime at Black Dudley, which was published in 1929, was Mystery Mile, published in 1930. Now, I don't have a standalone copy of this book, but I do have it in a collection, the Margery Allingham Omnibus, a trade paperback that collects the first one, The Crime at the Black Dudley, or The Black Dudley Murders, Mystery Mile, and Look to the Lady, which is also known as the Girth Chalice Mystery, which I do have, the third one here. But I do own this omnibus, and I just don't seem to have it here with me. I did at one time have it in Japan. I don't seem to have it now, so I think I must have brought it back home at some stage, and it's in storage in the States. As you probably are tired of hearing in many of my videos, I will be trying to bring that back, plus some other Allingham and, of course, scads of other books in my next trip home. But I do have that one. I'll put the picture up here on the screen. And Mystery Mile is another kind of adventure-focused, thriller-based Campion novel. Then we have Look to the Lady, which was published in 1931, also known as the Girth Chalice Mystery. And I have this one. And this is, these are really nice editions. These are the Avon Books editions, which usually had different kind of solid colors around the art and in the little inset art piece there. And Girth, this is again another thriller kind of. Campion is helping a family that has some ties to a kind of royal birthright of this land, and there's some criminals out to get it, maybe criminals working for foreign powers, etc. And Campion and some of his old chums work to help the family retrieve their claim on it. After the Girth Chalice Mystery, or Look to the Lady as it's also known. The Girth Chalice Mystery, I believe, is the U.S. title. And Look to the Lady, a little more poetic and interesting title, is the British title, of course. And then there's a more straightforward mystery novel, kind of moving out of Allingham by this time, was moving more into the straight up detective novel as it was becoming increasingly popular. And I guess she shifted Campion kind of more that direction. He's more of an observer and he's getting involved in the case for sure, but there's a little less physical threat of danger so often anymore as characterized the earlier books, and more kind of straight up detection. And that next novel was her fourth Campion novel was Police at the Funeral, published in 1931. I don't appear to have this one. I thought I had, but I don't find it here anyway. And one I do have somewhere and have read for sure is the fifth book, Sweet Danger, also known in the U.S. as The Fear Sign. And in this book, again, Campion and some pals come to the aid of a kind of parentless family, the Fittons, trying to assist them in a particular adventure. And this is kind of a little bit back, as the title implies, Sweet Danger, back in some thriller territory. And this is where Campion meets young Amanda Fitton, who is kind of becomes as his lieutenant in the cases, so to speak, and is a young, fetching girl, but a little too young for Campion. And but she's completely infatuated with him, and she will eventually come back and be Campion's wife in the future of the series. But she's quite a cool character. And in the BBC TV series that came out in 1989 and 1990, starring Peter Davison as Campion, they had Lisette Anthony play Amanda Fitton. She's probably a little older than the part called for, but you could tell sparks were flying already there. So it's that's another nice adaptation and a nice little touch that Margery Allingham returns to in the future of the series. I do own that one. I have read that one. I don't know where it is. It is not here. Okay, I do have the sixth novel, which was published in 1934, Death of a Ghost. Very good novel. I'll give you a little reading of the back here. The murderer is a connoisseur, killing a man at a crowded art show with a scissors. They call it a scissors, not a pair of scissors. Interesting. Even one encrusted with gems was a bit coarse, although one must allow for haste. But the second murder was so exquisitely handled that investigator Campion deduced that his murderer was indeed a madman with class. Campion's investigation of the backstabbing London art world soon carried him to a lavish dinner where Campion's own death was meant to be the nightcap to an otherwise scrumptious evening. This is a Bantam edition, which are also nice and kind of fit the Art Deco appeal of the time. This is how they describe confidential investigator Albert Campion. And he doesn't ever take any official title. He doesn't have a business card. He doesn't take paying clients. He's not a real PI. He just gets involved usually through friends, through acquaintances, through Scotland Yard or the British government. And he's just a guy, and a kind of solid, extremely capable guy that can fit into any social situation and work his way to the truth of a case. A tall, thin man with overly large spectacles, he is deceptively unobtrusive when tracking down a killer and uncannily capable of predicting the deadly twists of a criminal's mind. He is unquestionably a gentleman, but even Lugg, his dauntless valet, and his friends at Scotland Yard don't know all the secrets in Campion's past, or the confidential cases he has covertly solved while in His Majesty's service. So in His Majesty, I guess, is still when King George was in operation there, so pre-Queen Elizabeth. This one is very good, and the adaptation the BBC did is also quite good and faithful to the book. Then we have Flowers for the Judge from 1936. This is the 7th Campion novel, and this is another Bantam edition I have. The good thing about the Campion novels, Margery Allingham's Campion novels, is they perpetually get reprinted. So there's some newer versions that came out at some time in the teens, I think, or so, early 2000s. Anyway, you can still find them. The last time I was in a Barnes & Noble, I saw some. Overly priced, of course, but I recommend these old mass market paperbacks. And this one is quite good. This is set in a publishing house, a murder of a rather nasty head figure of the publishing house and who might be involved, and Campion gets roped in to investigate. After that, we have The Case of the Late Pig, which is, again, the one I do own, and this is the rare one that's narrated by Campion. Now, usually Campion, it's always kind of a third-person omniscient or third-person narration employed in these books and stories. But this one was narrated by, it was told in first person from Campion's point of view, so it makes it quite interesting. It's also a fairly slim novel. I've read it. It's very good, but I don't have it here with me. And what was published at this time was a collection of short stories. Now, Allingham had 3 collections published in her life, I believe. There was Mr. Campion, Criminologist in 1937. There was the Mr. Campion and Others, which I'll show you here in a second, and which I do have here, and then the Casebook of Mr. Campion in 1947. So I do have, now I've had alternate information that I've found online. Wikipedia lists the Mr. Campion and Others as being published in 1937, or 1939, sorry, but I found another source that had it being published in 1937. At any rate, it's a collection of, I believe it's 13 stories featuring Mr. Campion. But this is a nice collection. Again, this is back to the Avon editions. And you'll see, again, the color border and then the picture below. Again, nothing, not a fantastic cover, but, you know, these are very comfortable, fun to read editions. Now we come to maybe one of my favorite of the Campion novels, and certainly my favorite of the TV adaptations that were done in the late 80s, early 90s, and that is Dancers in Mourning. And this involves Campion with the theatrical world, where a famous dancer, I guess, is it Soutane? Is that his name? Johnny Soutane? Jimmy Soutane, star of London's Argosy Theatre. Okay, and there's a murder, and he's kind of implicated, and Campion at the behest kind of Soutane's wife, who Campion and his wife, his kind of neglected wife, is kind of they're getting a little vibe going on there. So you're almost hoping Soutane is guilty, so they can get something going, but. Campion's fairly unlucky in love until Amanda Fitton comes back in his life. At any rate, very, very good story. Again, deeply, getting deep into the emotional undercurrents of this theater scene and all the various actors and musicians and writers involved and directors of plays, etc. And Allingham does a really good job kind of getting into the characters' motivations, feelings. Again, she's very sensitively fine-tuned to the atmosphere of any given situation, and Campion is right there reading it all with a special radar that he's particularly skilled at. Dancers in Mourning, terrific book, published in 1937. Also in 37, of course, was The Case of the Late Pig. And Mr. Campion and Others perhaps came right around that time. Then we have The Fashion in Shrouds, 1938. And this brings Amanda Fitton from Sweet Danger back into Campion's life. She's now working in the fashion industry, and this is a fascinating read. And of course, in 1938, war is looming between Germany and England. It's on the horizon, and things are happening, and Campion's getting more involved in the war effort in the military. Kind of government espionage side. But this case puts a kind of stress on him, Campion and Amanda's relationship, which gets tested even further as we go on. But this one, again, very interesting. Two's Company, Three's a Shroud. That's pretty funny, huh? On the back of the book. Such was the fate of Georgia Wells' husbands when a better matrimonial prospect appeared on the scene. The coroner's verdict the first time was suicide while of unsound mind. The second time it was cardiac failure, probably caused by overindulgence. We will let our imagination run to where that kind of overindulgence might have been for a husband. There was no suspicion of foul play. When his sister became a pawn in the latest triangle, Mr. Campion began to wonder, was Georgia helping the deaths along, or was someone else making sure she got what she wanted at any cost, even murder? And again, this one has a lot to do with the fashion industry at the time. And it's a pretty thick one. It's 256 pages. So some of these are slimmer, but most of them run in the 200 to 180 to 200 range. Then we get full on into the wartime, and this is a kind of interesting wartime thriller that kind of crystallizes the relationship between Campion and Amanda. And it's very strained during most of this book, but it kind of comes to a head at the end. And that's Trader's Purse, 1940. And this one is interesting because at the beginning of the book, Campion has amnesia, and he doesn't know who he is, but he knows he has some important information, and it has something to do with a trader, as you would think from the title, Trader's Purse, the best in British mystery. And again, we're back to a Bantam edition here with the kind of sidelong, diagonal titles, and the kind of cool little Art Deco swoosh on the back there, although we're kind of past the Art Deco time. So again, remembrance of things deadly. The man had his first great shock when he awakened in a hospital with a nasty bump on his head and no memory of who he was or how he got there. Now, driving through rural England, a lovely woman at his side, claiming to be his fiancée, that's Amanda Fitton, and the police on his trail, he had his second shock. He discovered he was Albert Campion on a mission of vital importance to His Majesty's government, but all Campion could remember of his assignment was a mysterious number 15, until he was presented with something he would never forget, a murder. Anyway, good book, a little more intense, and Campion, we get a little more personal side of Campion because he's always usually in full command of his faculties and the situation for the most part. And here he is at a complete loss because he just doesn't know who he is and he's not acting as his usual self. Okay, then we have a book that I have a hardcover edition of, Coroner's Pigeon. The U.S. title is Pearls Before Swine, and this is a case where I think the U.S. title is better. This was published in 1945, and it is set during World War II. Still, the war is not over yet. Set in wartime London during the Blitz. Amanda is, now Mrs. Albert Campion, and she's only seen peripherally in the story, not much at all. And this is quite good. I don't remember all the details of the plot. It's been a long time since I've read it. I do own it in hardcover. I don't have it here with me. That's the 11th novel. That's the 12th novel, sorry. And the 13th is More Work for the Undertaker. And this one, again, we're back to the Avon editions. So sorry for the grab bag of editions here. But More Work for the Undertaker was published in 1948. So now we're post-war. And we're fully in Albert Campion, now married, no longer a bachelor looking for love while he's solving cases and in adventures. He is a settled man with a young son, I believe, but he is also involved in cases still, helping the police. So their parents were dead, their fortune is lost, and the 5 Palinode siblings are shunned by their neighbors as hopeless eccentrics. Suddenly, 2 of them are found dead under the most suspicious circumstances. The surviving Palinodes just want to be left alone, but a ruthless mastermind armed with lethal potions and a poisoned pen has made an advance order for 3 more Palinode coffins. The Yard believes that the strange family is killing itself off, but Albert Campion isn't so sure. Okay, very, very cool book and story. Okay, and then we're moving on to one I haven't read. It's one of the most famous. It's the only Albert Campion novel that was turned into a film, and that's Tiger in the Smoke, although Campion isn't involved in the film at all. I think he wrote his character out. Tiger in the Smoke returns a little bit more to a thriller base. Campion's a little sidelined, which is probably one of the reasons why I haven't been too interested to read this one. But it is rated very highly by most fans of the series as being very intense and suspenseful. There's a serial killer on the loose, and Campion and the police are trying to nab him. And the killer's name is it Johnny Havoc? Is that right? Anyway, kind of atmospheric cover there. Again, back to the Bantam edition for that one. As I'm seesawing through editions, my last one that I have here with me, because I haven't really went beyond these later or middle period Campion novels. That one, by the way, Tiger in the Smoke, is from 1952. And then we have The Beckoning Lady, or The Estate of the Beckoning Lady, which was published in 1955. In this one, we see the return of Campion's wife, Amanda, and their son. The son is an interesting character in himself, as you could quite imagine with such interesting parents. He's quite an inquisitive and smart little kid. He is peripherally involved in the story, but this one is a good one too. Just read you a little bit of the blurb. 2 murders too many. Little Doom, the pesky tax collector, meets his big Doom violently, bashed like a mosquito in an open meadow. Soon after, old Uncle William expires peacefully in his room at the Beckoning Lady, which is, I guess, a pub or an inn. Albert Campion has a hunch that the 2 deaths are related, and that the beloved eccentric's demise wasn't quite as natural as everyone supposed. So it's off to Suffolk to attend the wildest weekend party of the decade and to expose a murderer before he or she beckons another poor unfortunate soul toward an untimely end. And then a little bit here about Campion, and according to the Avon version, okay? Equally at home in the underworld and among the upper crust, super sleuth Albert Campion rarely misses a clue or fails to find a motive. Behind his horn-rimmed glasses and mild-mannered facade is a brilliant mind that can penetrate to the villainous heart of the most heinous crime. And that's a good description of him. He seems unobtrusive, but he is anything but, a waste of space. He is always thinking, always doing something, and moving forward to penetrate the heart of the crime. The Estate of the Beckoning Lady was published in 1955, and that's the last of the Campions that I currently own. Now, Allingham did write a few more. She wrote Hide My Eyes in 1958, The China Governess in 1962, The Mind Readers in 1965. So, 36 years later, Campion is still active. So that's pretty interesting. And Cargo of Eagles, she started, but she passed away in 1966, and that didn't come out till 1968. And it was completed by her husband, Philip Youngman Carter. As I mentioned, there were a couple other story collections that came out. And then Youngman Carter went on to write 2 more, Mr. Campion's Farthing and Mr. Campion's Falcon. And those were published in 1969 and 1970, respectively. Now, I have an interesting biography of Margery Allingham, Ink in Her Blood, The Life and Crime Fiction of Margery Allingham, by Richard Martin. Great picture there of Miss Allingham. Such a cool photo, kicking back with the cigarillo, puffing away. I hope that didn't contribute to her breast cancer, but it probably did. I haven't read this yet, other than snatches here and there over times when I was reading the stories. It's been a while since I've read a Campion novel. They're a very intense read, even if it seems like just a typical classic murder mystery. They're never really typical in one sense. And also, they're very fine-tuned. You're just really involved in all the little undercurrents, as I mentioned before, of what's going on in the family connections or relationships between lovers and fiancés and husbands and wives and hangers-on in the family, etc. Anyway, excellent writer. If you like this kind of classic British detective fiction, I highly recommend the Albert Campion series. I haven't read any of her non-Campion books. She did write a few. Some of them were not mysteries. Margery Allingham, again, only lived for 62 years, but she put out a lot of interesting content. And the last thing I'll end with is just a reminder that there is a British BBC TV series that was very well done to exquisite period form or exquisite period detail, done in 1989 for the first season and 1990 for the second season. They only did 4 novels in 2 parts, so it's 8 episodes for series 1 and 8 episodes for series 2, starring Peter Davison, who played Tristan Farnon in All Creatures Great and Small. If any of you remember that TV series, he was excellent in that, and that brought him to fame. He then went on to play the 5th Doctor in Doctor Who in the 80s, and afterwards in the late 80s and early 90s, he played Albert Campion. He also appeared in many other successful TV series. He's a very highly successful actor and a very good actor. Absolutely spot-on casting as Campion, especially when he's in the Campion hat and suit and spectacles, etc. And also fantastic casting for his manservant Lug in Brian Glover. What a great casting crew was to get him. Those two work well together. They adapted. Unfortunately, they kind of went in order, so they kind of bypassed the Crime of the Black Dudley, because that's not really fully focused on Campion. But they did start with Mystery Mile. They did the next of them in kind of order. So they did book 2 through 9 in each 2 seasons. So they did Mystery Mile, Look to the Lady, Police at the Funeral, Sweet Danger, Death of a Ghost, Flowers for the Judge, The Case of the Late Pig, and Dancers in Mourning. And unfortunately, the TV series was canceled. It was probably pretty expensive to make. It was coming out around the same time as the Poirot series and the Sherlock Holmes series starring Jeremy Brett, and a little bit after the Miss Marples. I think they were still making a few with Joan Hickson. So it maybe got a little lost in there with those shows, and it's got a particular, the Campion books are a little different, a little eccentric and weird in a way, I suppose. And for whatever reason, it wasn't continued, which is too bad, because they were coming up on they started with some thrillers, which were fun, but they were just starting to get into the really meaty, full-on detective novels kind of when they finished the second season. So we didn't get any more adaptations, and no one's tried it since, really, which is too bad. But that series is highly recommended, and it can be found, I'm sure, perhaps on YouTube, I don't know, but certainly on some streaming services like Acorn TV or BritBox or something like that. Recommend it if you can find it and if you're interested. But I do recommend reading the books first. The TV series does do an excellent job of adapting the stories, however. Well, that's it for this entry in the Grand Dames of Golden Age Detective Fiction. I'll be back in a future video at some point to talk about Dorothy L. Sayers and Josephine Tay, Niall Marsh, of which I know much less of her, and Gladys Mitchell, who is not usually lumped in with those top 5 Grand Dame ladies, but as I think is now that her books are getting republished and circulated more widely again, deserves to be in there. She was extremely prolific, and she created a really memorable character in Dame Beatrice Lestrange Bradley, Mrs. Bradley, in other words. And that's someone who I need to talk about at some stage as well. So anyway, thanks much for watching, as always, if you stuck through to the end of this long video. And I will see you in another video real soon. Thanks a bunch. Take care.